120 days. That is how long Europe has to fundamentally restructure its entire trade relationship with America before economic annihilation begins. Trump announced it Saturday, February 1st, 10% tariffs on 8 NATO allies. June 1st, 25% tariffs. 4 months to build alternative payment systems or watch centuries of transatlantic commerce collapse. The clock is ticking. And Europe is scrambling for physical silver like their economic survival depends on it. Because it does. Let me break down the mathematics that are driving European institutions into full panic mode. 4 months equals 120 days. The European Union conducts approximately $6.5 trillion in annual trade with the United States. If even 20% of that trade needs to migrate away from dollar-based settlement systems to avoid tariff destruction, we are talking about $1.3 trillion in commerce that requires new payment mechanisms. But here is where the mathematics become impossible. Silver-backed trade settlement requires physical collateral. Industry standards suggest approximately 1 ounce of silver per $3,000 of transaction value for secure settlement. That means $1.3 trillion in trade requires roughly 433 million ounces of silver collateral. In 120 days, that equals 3.6 million ounces of silver that European institutions must acquire every single day between now and June 1st. The global mining industry produces approximately 800 million ounces of silver annually. That sounds adequate until you realize that 600 million ounces goes to industrial applications that cannot be substituted. Electronics manufacturing, solar panel production, medical devices. This leaves roughly 200 million ounces available for investment and monetary applications in a normal year. European institutions need 433 million ounces in 120 days. Global investment supply is 200 million ounces in 365 days. The mathematical impossibility is obvious. Even if Europeans could acquire every single ounce of available investment silver globally, they would still need more than double that amount. And they cannot wait 365 days. They have 120 days. The supply shortage is already creating panic in physical silver markets. Swiss vaults are reporting unprecedented demand from European institutional clients. London dealers are extending delivery timelines to 8 weeks. Singapore storage facilities are at capacity with waiting lists. The infrastructure for large-scale silver commerce is being overwhelmed by emergency procurement programs that were never supposed to exist simultaneously. The European Central Bank sees the crisis developing and has quietly authorized emergency silver purchases by member state central banks. Not for traditional monetary reserves, for trade facilitation reserves. Official documents leaked to financial intelligence services reveal ECB working groups have been preparing for exactly this scenario since Trump's first presidency. Their analysis concluded that physical precious metals offer the only practical alternative to dollar-based settlement during periods of currency warfare. Gold is too expensive per unit for routine commercial transactions. Other metals lack sufficient standardization and market liquidity. Silver occupies the optimal position for large-scale trade settlement applications. But optimal positioning means nothing if adequate supply is not available. And adequate supply is not available, which explains why physical silver premiums over paper prices are exploding. London silver trades at 95 per ounce, while Shanghai silver trades at 108. European buyers are paying 159 per ounce for guaranteed delivery within 30 days. The premium expansion reflects the reality that paper silver markets have become completely disconnected from physical silver availability. When European institutions place orders for millions of ounces with immediate delivery requirements, they discover that physical metal simply does not exist in the quantities needed at anywhere near official price levels. This discovery is driving European institutions to establish direct relationships with mining companies, bypassing traditional precious metals markets entirely. Major automotive manufacturers are contracting with silver miners for future production. Electronics companies are securing long-term supply agreements. Financial institutions are negotiating exclusive purchasing arrangements. The direct dealing removes silver from normal market channels before it ever reaches traditional pricing mechanisms. Mining companies receive premium prices for guaranteed supply, while institutional buyers secure metal that would otherwise be unavailable at any price through normal channels. This parallel market development explains why official silver statistics appear adequate, while physical buyers report severe shortage conditions. The statistics measure normal market flows. Current conditions represent emergency procurement by institutional buyers who never previously competed for physical silver. The competition is intensifying because Chinese institutions continue their systematic accumulation programs simultaneously with European emergency buying. Chinese strategic timeline operates in years while European tactical timeline operates in days. The convergence creates bidding wars for scarce physical inventory among buyers who cannot easily defer their requirements. Chinese buyers cannot delay strategic positioning based on European procurement schedules. European buyers cannot delay operational preparations based on Chinese accumulation programs. Both categories compete for the same limited supplies of investment-grade silver suitable for monetary applications. The bidding competition is driving physical silver prices far above official quotations, as institutions recognize that supply security matters more than purchase price for their strategic requirements. Better to pay premium prices for guaranteed delivery than risk operational failure due to metal unavailability. But even premium pricing cannot create additional physical supply in the time frame required. Mining operations schedule production years in advance. Emergency demand cannot be accommodated by simply paying higher prices. The physical constraints are absolute regardless of financial incentives. This reality is forcing European institutions to consider alternatives that seemed unthinkable 6 months ago. Requisitioning silver from jewelry manufacturers, purchasing silverware and art objects for melting, negotiating with governments to access strategic metal reserves, all desperate measures that indicate how severe the supply crisis has become. The desperation reflects the recognition that failure to secure adequate silver collateral by June 1st means economic isolation from the United States. 25% tariffs make most European exports uncompetitive in American markets. Companies that cannot establish alternative payment systems face potential bankruptcy. The bankruptcy threat is not theoretical. German automotive exports to America exceed $45 billion annually. Under 25% tariffs, these exports become economically impossible unless alternative settlement systems are operational. German companies must have silver-backed payment capabilities by June 1st or accept massive revenue losses. The same calculation applies across every sector affected by Trump's tariff threats. French aerospace companies, Dutch technology firms, Swedish industrial manufacturers, all face the same deadline. All need silver collateral capabilities. All are competing for the same inadequate supply. The competition is creating unprecedented conditions in precious metals markets. Industrial silver users who previously operated with minimal inventory are building strategic reserves. Electronics manufacturers who relied on just-in-time delivery are stockpiling months of supply. Medical device companies who never considered supply disruption are securing long-term contracts. This industrial hoarding removes additional silver from markets just as monetary demand is exploding. Companies that historically consumed 50 million ounces annually are now holding 150 million ounces in inventory. The precautionary demand is creating artificial scarcity even beyond the mathematical impossibility of European procurement requirements. The Federal Reserve recognizes that European migration away from dollar systems threatens American monetary hegemony and is considering intervention to prevent complete breakdown of transatlantic financial relationships. But intervention options are limited because Trump has made the political decision to use economic weapons regardless of financial consequences. Fed officials understand that European success in building alternative payment systems creates permanent precedent for other countries seeking independence from dollar-based clearing. If Europe can establish functional silver-backed trade settlement, China will accelerate similar programs. Russia will expand existing initiatives. The entire dollar-dominated international monetary system faces existential threat. This system threat explains why American precious metals dealers are reporting unusual demand from domestic institutional buyers. If European alternative systems prove functional, American entities need similar capabilities to maintain competitive positioning in fragmenting global markets. The fragmentation accelerates because Trump's deadline pressure prevents gradual transition that might preserve hybrid systems. European institutions cannot spend years developing alternatives while facing imminent tariff destruction. They must implement emergency measures that prioritize functionality over integration with existing American systems. The emergency implementation creates permanent infrastructure for dollar-independent commerce. Once European companies establish silver-based settlement capabilities, they retain these capabilities regardless of future political developments. Alternative systems become operational reality rather than theoretical contingency. This permanence terrifies American monetary authorities because it represents irreversible erosion of dollar centrality in international commerce. Each European company that migrates to silver settlement is one less entity dependent on American financial systems for operational functionality. The migration is accelerating despite massive logistical challenges because European leadership recognizes that operational independence requires immediate action. Every day of delay reduces the probability of securing adequate silver supplies before June 1st deadline. The probability calculation is driving round-the-clock procurement efforts as European institutions compete not just with each other, but against time itself. Procurement teams are working with mining companies across multiple continents. Transportation specialists are arranging emergency shipments. Storage facilities are expanding capacity on accelerated timelines. But physical reality cannot be compressed indefinitely. Silver mining operations cannot produce 433 million ounces in 120 days, regardless of financial incentives. The timeline is mathematically impossible given production constraints and existing industrial commitments. This impossibility is forcing European institutions to explore alternatives that dilute their silver collateral requirements, hybrid systems that combine silver backing with other assets, partial collateralization that reduces metal requirements per transaction, risk-sharing arrangements among multiple institutions. The exploration reveals the fundamental challenge facing any monetary system based on physical assets. Physical materials exist in finite quantities that cannot be expanded rapidly to meet sudden demand increases. Unlike fiat currencies, physical money cannot be printed to accommodate emergency requirements. This constraint means European institutions must compete for existing silver supplies rather than creating additional supplies through policy decisions. The competition drives prices higher until demand is rationed to match available supply. The rationing process has begun with premium pricing for immediate delivery and extended timelines for standard purchases. Industrial users are being displaced by monetary users, willing to pay higher prices. Investment buyers are being crowded out by institutional buyers with emergency requirements. But rationing through pricing assumes that adequate supply exists at some price level. Current European requirements suggest that no price level can create adequate supply within the required timeline. The shortage is absolute rather than relative. This absolute shortage means some European institutions will fail to secure required silver collateral regardless of their willingness to pay premium prices. The mathematical impossibility ensures that procurement competition produces winners and losers rather than universal success. The winners will be entities that acted earliest and secured supply before competition intensified. The losers will be entities that waited for better prices or assumed supply would remain available. June 1st deadline makes no allowance for procurement delays or supply disappointments. The deadline pressure is creating irrational behavior, as institutions recognize that silver availability matters more than silver pricing for their survival requirements. Reports indicate European buyers paying $150 per ounce for guaranteed 60-day delivery, while spot markets quote $95 per ounce for uncertain availability. The price differential reflects the reality that certain delivery has become infinitely more valuable than uncertain savings. Institutions cannot gamble on supply availability when operational failure means potential bankruptcy. This risk assessment is driving procurement decisions that ignore traditional cost-benefit analysis. Better to overpay for guaranteed supply than risk total business disruption due to inadequate collateral capabilities. The overpaying creates positive feedback loops as premium pricing validates higher silver values and attracts additional buyers who fear missing the opportunity. Institutions that planned gradual accumulation are implementing emergency procurement to avoid being left without access. The emergency implementation compounds supply pressure as more buyers compete for the same limited inventory. Each additional institutional buyer reduces the probability that remaining buyers will secure adequate supplies. The probability mathematics are becoming apparent to European procurement specialists who are discovering that their requirements cannot all be satisfied simultaneously. The recognition is driving increasingly desperate tactics as institutions compete not just for better prices, but for any access to physical silver. The desperation reflects the understanding that June 1st represents a hard deadline with catastrophic consequences for unprepared entities. Unlike normal business cycles that allow extended adjustment periods, tariff implementation provides no flexibility for operational delays. European institutions must have functional silver-backed payment systems operational by June 1st, or accept economic isolation from American markets. The binary choice eliminates middle ground and forces immediate action regardless of procurement difficulties. The action is producing exactly the supply crisis that mathematical analysis predicted. Too many buyers competing for too little silver in too short a time frame. The outcome is predetermined by arithmetic. Available supply cannot meet projected demand within deadline constraints. Physical silver holders who positioned before the scramble began benefit from every aspect of the developing crisis. Supply shortage drives prices higher. Emergency procurement creates premium demand. Deadline pressure prevents normal price discovery mechanisms from functioning. The crisis represents transition from industrial commodity markets to monetary utility markets, as silver assumes an essential role in international trade settlement. The transition rewards early positioning in physical silver before mainstream recognition of the mathematical impossibility becomes apparent. That recognition is spreading rapidly as European institutions discover that adequate silver simply does not exist in the quantities and timeline their survival requires. The scramble intensifies as the clock keeps ticking toward June 1st. 120 days, getting shorter every moment. The mathematics have not changed. The supply constraints remain absolute. The deadline approaches without compromise. Europe scrambles for physical silver because alternatives do not exist. The scramble validates silver's monetary role in the emerging post-dollar international system. Physical silver holders are positioned for the transition that European panic buying is accelerating. The acceleration is creating secondary effects that amplify the original crisis. As European institutions bid up physical silver prices, American corporations are implementing defensive strategies to avoid being completely priced out of silver markets. The defensive buying adds another layer of demand to already overwhelming procurement requirements. The American participation transforms what began as European crisis into global competition for scarce silver supplies, when the world's two largest economies simultaneously scramble for the same finite resource. The mathematical impossibility becomes even more severe. This global expansion of silver demand is attracting attention from other institutional categories that previously ignored precious metals entirely. Sovereign wealth funds are initiating silver allocation programs. Pension systems are exploring alternative asset strategies. Insurance companies are considering commodity reserves. The institutional adoption is happening rapidly because the European crisis demonstrates silver's practical utility during monetary system fragmentation. Entities worldwide observe European willingness to pay extreme prices for silver access and draw conclusions about their own strategic requirements. The conclusions are driving preventive accumulation as institutions seek to secure silver supplies before facing emergency situations where availability is uncertain and pricing is extreme. Better to accumulate during stable periods than attempt procurement during crisis conditions. The preventive demand creates additional competition for already constrained supplies. European emergency buying, Chinese strategic accumulation, American defensive positioning, and global preventive procurement all operating simultaneously against fixed physical inventory. The convergence is producing market conditions that have never existed in precious metals history. Demand from multiple institutional categories exceeding available supply by enormous margins. Premium pricing becoming standard rather than exceptional. Delivery delays extending far beyond normal commercial timeframes. These conditions indicate fundamental transformation in silver market structure from commodity applications to monetary applications. When silver becomes essential infrastructure for international commerce, its pricing reflects necessity rather than convenience. Necessity pricing operates according to different principles than convenience pricing. Convenience buyers defer purchases when prices rise. Necessity buyers increase purchases when prices rise, because higher prices validate the strategic importance of the underlying asset. This validation effect explains why European procurement intensity has not decreased despite escalating costs. Expensive silver confirms that European institutions need more silver rather than less. The logic drives continued accumulation regardless of price levels. The continued accumulation is creating permanent support for silver prices that extends far beyond immediate crisis conditions. Institutional buyers implementing trade settlement systems do not abandon these systems when political tensions moderate. They maintain strategic capabilities indefinitely. The maintenance creates structural demand for physical silver that operates independently of specific geopolitical developments. Even if Trump reverses tariff threats, European institutions will not dismantle alternative payment capabilities they developed at enormous cost and difficulty. The capability retention reflects recognition that political relationships can change rapidly with devastating consequences. Institutions that survive the June 1st deadline by establishing silver-backed systems will not voluntarily return to vulnerable dependence on potentially hostile payment networks. This strategic thinking is driving long-term procurement contracts that extend far beyond immediate emergency requirements. European institutions are securing silver supplies not just for current crisis, but for permanent operational capabilities. The forward contracting removes additional silver from markets for years rather than months. The temporal extension of silver demand means current crisis represents beginning rather than peak of institutional silver requirements. Emergency procurement establishes foundation for ongoing strategic accumulation that continues operating after immediate crisis resolves. The ongoing demand provides floor under silver prices that rises as more institutions implement permanent silver-based capabilities. Each additional entity that adopts silver settlement increases minimum required silver supply and reduces availability for remaining users. The reduction creates competitive pressure among institutional buyers that drives prices higher as entities compete for diminishing supplies. Higher prices attract additional buyers who interpret expensive silver as validation of strategic importance. The attraction creates positive feedback loops as more buyers chase scarce supplies and drive prices even higher. Each price increase validates previous buyers' decisions and encourages additional institutional adoption. The adoption is spreading beyond immediate crisis participants to encompass entities that observe European procurement efforts and recognize potential value for their own operations. The demonstration effect amplifies original demand by orders of magnitude. This amplification means European crisis is catalyzing global transition towards silver-based monetary systems rather than localized response to specific political threats. The transition creates permanent increase in institutional silver demand that extends far beyond original European requirements. The permanence is crucial because it transforms silver from cyclical commodity to strategic asset with ongoing monetary utility. Strategic assets command premium pricing because their value reflects operational necessity rather than speculative sentiment. The premium recognition is driving institutional silver accumulation programs that prioritize supply security over cost optimization. Better to overpay for guaranteed access than risk operational vulnerability due to inadequate reserves. The security premium is becoming embedded in silver market structure as more institutions recognize monetary utility and implement strategic accumulation. The embedding creates price floors that rise with expanding institutional adoption. The expansion continues as more entities observe European crisis and conclude they need similar capabilities for their own strategic positioning. Each additional institutional adopter reduces silver available for remaining potential users. The reduction intensifies competitive pressure and drives prices higher until some categories of demand are rationed out through financial constraints. But rationed buyers do not disappear. They continue seeking access and return when conditions allow. The latent demand creates potential for rapid price acceleration when supply availability improves. Each increment of additional supply gets absorbed quickly by buyers waiting for access opportunities. European institutions discover physical reality as procurement efforts encounter absolute supply constraints. The discovery drives desperate tactics as silver availability matters more than pricing for survival. 120 days, the mathematics remain unforgiving. The scramble continues.